For decades, the independent Celtic kingdom of Noricum maintained friendly relations with the neighboring Roman state. But during the time of Emperor Augustus, Noricum also became part of the Roman Empire. So how did it come to that? According to a Roman historian Cassius Dio, in the year 16 BC, the Pannonians and Norici invaded the Roman territory of Istria, but were quickly subdued. It is unclear what caused this sudden change of policy among the Norican Celts. It might have been a result of shifting internal power dynamics within the Noricum, or maybe the Pannonians, who were less friendly towards Rome and were even defeated decades ago during Augustus' attack on Siscia, managed to persuade Noricans to a joint military action. Or perhaps only one faction within Noricum attacked Roman lands without the blessing of the governing body. Whether it was one or a combination of multiple of those reasons and then some, the Romans used this attack as a pretext to march into and occupy Noricum within a year. This happened relatively peacefully though, without an actual war being waged. The Norican people were by then Romanized to a high degree and previously enjoyed good trade and political relations with Rome, which also fueled their own economic prosperity. And seeing the might of Rome marching towards them, the pragmatic local populace had no desire to start a losing war. The short-term result was that a Roman garrison was stationed across Noricum. Augustus also granted Roman citizenship and privileges to prominent, friendly individuals within Noricum. Before becoming an actual province half a century later, Noricum probably held the status of a military district. During this time, Roman overlords recruited men for their armies, collected taxes, and began building large road networks. Additionally, the source of the famed Norican iron, Ferrum Noricum, would now be directly under Roman control. Galen of Pergamon, one of the most accomplished healers and medical researchers in antiquity, would advise the use of correct instruments for surgery, specifically those made of Norican iron, as it was the only one sturdy, yet flexible enough to not break in the surgeon's hands. The relatively lax oversight and repression enabled Noricum to continue steady economic and cultural development, which would surpass nearby regions occupied during that time, like Raetia in the west and Pannonia in the east. But in the year 14 BC, the Pannonians, who already acknowledged Roman supremacy 2 years earlier, again rebelled against their overlords. These were probably the same peoples that conscripted the help of Norici for the attack on Istria. This conflict would become known as the Pannonian War, though it would also spread southwards towards the Adriatic coast. We know, despite poor sources about the war, that the Emperor Augustus entrusted the command over the Roman forces to his friend and best general, Agrippa. Agrippa managed to silence the revolt, but died soon after, in the spring of 12 BC, and Augustus transferred the command over the war to his stepson, later Emperor Tiberius. He was joined by the allied tribe of Scurdisci, and together they defeated enemy Pannonians between the Sava and Drava rivers, chief among them the tribe of Breuci. Tiberius ravaged the Pannonian countryside, confiscated their weapons, and sold all men of military age into slavery. This wasn't the end of the war though. Tiberius returned next year to subdue the Illyrian tribe of Dalmatia, but the Pannonians also used his absence to revolt again. As such, he was forced to shift between the two fronts. In the end, Tiberius was successful, though he had to return year after, in 10 BC, to defeat Dacians who invaded Roman territory across the frozen river Danube. Alongside, Tiberius again had to act against the Dalmati, who refused to pay their tribute. Next year, the Dalmatian Pannonians revolted again, and Tiberius this time finally broke their will to fight by causing many casualties. The Pannonian War ended next year, when the Roman army under the legate Sextus Apuleius conquered the territory between the rivers Drava and Danube. Tiberius was at the time transferred to the frontier against Germanic tribes. Thus ended the 6-year war against the Pannonians, Dalmati, and Dacians in this region. Emperor Augustus would later recount these events in his report, The Deeds of the Divine Augustus. The tribes of Pannonians, who were never reached by the Roman army before my rule, and who were defeated by my stepson and legate Tiberius Neron, I've subjugated to the Roman state and also moved the borders of Illyricum to the shores of the Danube River. Under my supreme command, I have defeated and obliterated the army of Dacians that crossed the river and forced them to submit to the power of Rome. The exact extent of the Roman conquest remains a point of deliberation, as the lack of archaeological finds doesn't support Roman conquest and presence in the northeastern Pannonia during this time. While probably not all Illyrian and Celtic tribes between the Adriatic and Danube were conquered during the Pannonian War, Rome now had influence over the major part of the region. But this war also demonstrated the will of its people to revolt against the Roman invader again and again. And perhaps they wouldn't have to wait long until they would try one more time.